Welcome to the M&A Unplugged podcast. Our mission is to help you be better prepared for your business acquisition or sale. Being prepared will ensure you maximize returns and minimize risks. This is M&A Unplugged with your host, Domenic Rinaldi.
Welcome back to M&A Unplugged, and I'm your host, Domenic Rinaldi. I can't thank my guest today enough for coming on and sharing her acquisition story. Priscilla McKinney is the owner and founder of Little Bird Marketing, a B2B digital marketing agency. They specialize in helping people strategically build and execute an online marketing plan, and in her words, be able to put their heads on their pillow at night knowing the marketing is working while they're sleeping. Priscilla decided that she was going to grow her business through acquisition after receiving a call from another business owner of a similar type of agency who was interested in selling his firm to her. What transpired from there is a cautionary tale on the many pitfalls in an M&A transaction and the importance of surrounding yourself with an experienced M&A team. Priscilla shares how her diligence was not near enough, how she almost lost all of her clients 1 year after the acquisition, but how this acquisition has propelled her and her company to another level that might never have been achieved. You're probably wondering, how could she lose almost all of the clients and still be able to say she would do the acquisition all over again? Listen to this episode. I promise you, you won't be disappointed with Priscilla's delivery and candor about where she went wrong and what she would do differently in the future. This episode was so much fun for me because Priscilla didn't hold back, and she really helped us deliver on our promise to help other entrepreneurs be smarter about their own transactions. But before we get into today's episode, if you want to avoid common pitfalls and the risk of losing substantial dollars, you need to know how ready you really are to buy a business. Because I believe proper preparation is so critical to your deal success, we have published several free resources to help you be better prepared. You can access these resources on either of our websites, sunacquisitions.com or K2Advisor, K the number 2, adviser.com/resources. Being prepared is critical to ensuring that you maximize returns and minimize risks. Thank you for being here, and I know you're going to get a ton out of today's episode. Hey, Priscilla, welcome to M&A Unplugged.
Dom, thanks so much for having me. I've been really looking forward to this, although some of these questions are going to be excruciating, but I'm willing. I'm willing.
Well, hey, thank you so much for being willing to be on the show, because I'm so excited to talk about your growth through acquisition. You run a company for a long time. You decided to grow it through acquisition, and I'm really excited to dive in and learn about your process and what you went through. And I'll be learning as my audience learns, because we did not help you with that transaction. So you and I are just meeting for the first time. So we'll be revealing that as we go along. But before we get there, love to talk a bit about your story. You started this company back in 2009, Little Bird Marketing, and I don't even know if it was called Little Bird back then. And you clearly have not had a straight path to growth. It sounds like in the little time that we've chatted, you had some bumps in the road. So
Yeah.
if you could share
that
with the audience your background and what Little Bird does and how you got to today, and then we'll dive into the acquisition that you did.
Right. Well, I think what's pertinent to this conversation is that I did start it and I bought small little leasehold improvements from someone. So I didn't buy a business from them. And so that business was called Grow Marketing at the time. I'm like, yeah, that sounds great. It's a long story about how I thought that was a good idea. But then what happened was in 2011, we had the only F5 tornado on record in the US. So within about 22 minutes, we lost about 35% of our town. And it was pretty devastating, as you can imagine. A lot of businesses gone. My business was not taken in that tornado, but 3 weeks later, I stood on the sidewalk and watched my design studio burn to the ground.
Oh my goodness.
So,
Oh
you
my
know,
goodness.
I had spent the last 3 weeks really helping my other clients get back on their feet and helping anybody any way you possibly could. This help, this help. Everybody learned. Help who you can, when you can, as much as you can, for as long as you can, just everything that you could possibly do. And I didn't know that 3 weeks later I would be the recipient of some of that help. And it was brutal.
Oh
It was
my
brutal.
goodness. Oh my goodness. What part of the country is this in?
This is in Joplin, Missouri. Hmm.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Wow. And when you first started out, were you a B2B digital marketing firm? Is that what you were doing back early days, or is it transformed into that? Were you doing something different back then?
It's really transformed into that. We were just more a generic marketing firm, and I
Okay.
realized very early on that I needed to specialize. And I do have a couple of clients that are B2C, but that's not where we live and breathe. We really are in that B2B space, digital lead generation, digital transformation,
Got it.
influencers on social, and content. That's really where we live.
Got it. Oh my goodness. So your business burns to the ground. By the way, I have another story with another client from many years ago. Similar situation. They rebuilt their business and they're doing great. But so your business burns to the ground. What do you do then? What? Yeah. What do you do then?
Well, you either walk away or you double down. That's what you
Yeah.
do. There's two options. I do think that, I love this quote, uh, crisis is easy, but the day to day will wear you out.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I do think there's a lot of truth to that because, sometimes when things are so bad, there's only two options. You stop or you go. And
Yeah.
actually that clarity is something you don't get when you're running a company on a normal basis, right? You're in the middle of it. You're in the thick of
Yeah.
it. You got a million details going on. But when you're standing in front of a building that's burning, you've got two decisions in front of you, right?
Yeah.
And that
Right.
clarity is something I actually lean into quite a bit. Like now, if I were back in that position, what are the very clear options that I have here? So in some ways, some of that is a gift in retrospect,
Yeah.
obviously, in experience, but it really morphed into that over time because I realized I really needed to specialize and I was becoming more clear about what I wanted to do in the world, what I had to offer.
So if I get what you're saying here is you recalibrated and you rebuilt, but you rebuilt in a different way.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you pick back up the pieces in 2011 or 2012. And does your company then become Little Bird Marketing at that point in time?
It does. It burned down on Tuesday and we picked up the pieces and signed a contract on Friday. So,
Wow.
you just, you operate out of where you need to operate. We had just had a tornado. We couldn't even get computers. There weren't, half of our roads were blocked, off. It was just a real, logistical nightmare, but you just do what you can.
Yeah.
And, luckily for me, everybody in the area, because we'd just been through that collectively, really understood. I wasn't the only person going through something this
Yeah.
devastating. And
Yeah.
so there was a lot of understanding, a lot of empathy. And so I was able to go forward. And I really am thankful for that.
Well, kudos to you. I can't even imagine. That could be a whole other episode about overcoming such diversity. So you build back up the business, you rebrand it. How long do you have the business before you decide that maybe growing through acquisition is a viable path for you?
Probably about 7 years. I had thought about it a little earlier, but to be really honest, I don't think I knew enough about it. And it was just too intimidating for me. And also I came into marketing not with a degree in marketing. I came into marketing with a degree in cultural anthropology and just a lot of great elbow grease. And just this is kind of where my genius lies, and I'm not trying to pat myself on the back. I mean, it's just you have to understand what you're good at and celebrate that and work, create a business around that. And so I created this a little bit more, maybe say by hook or by crook, and it wasn't this clear path even for me as a career that
Right.
wasn't clear. So there's a lot of layers going on there. And so I think it took me a little longer to realize, it's very hard to build this business one brick at a time. It would be a lot nicer to be able to strap another wall, to this
Mhm.
business and move a little quicker. And that was my thought. It was, we at a certain scale, you get certain opportunities. And I think that's really where my thought process was and why I started going that direction, or at least entertaining that direction.
Yeah, I think you're bringing up such a good point. I talk to a lot of business owners every day, and organic growth has become so hard. Just even hiring talent has become so difficult. And then beyond the talent, going out and figuring out all the new technologies and your world, which is digital marketing, which is, all right, where do you spend your dollars and where it's going to give you the biggest return? And organic growth has become very hard. It's not as easy as it used to be. And we espouse that growing through acquisition is a great way to grow your business and put it on steroids, especially with today's interest rates and access to money. Mm-hmm. So you decide that this is a viable path for you. What's the first thing you do once you decided that you were going to go down this path? What's your next step?
Well, first of all, some of the things you just mentioned, like practically make me cry. So let me pull myself back together again. So this is, I think, the first mistake that I made right here is that I am very open to risk. That's just kind of who I am, right? My husband, very open to risk. And so I don't have a counterpart that's just saying, no, you can't do that. I've never had that, and I've always been able to just dream and do. That's been my path. And unfortunately, there are some other downsides to that. The first mistake I made was moving too quickly and thinking, oh, that's a good idea. Okay, we're doing it. And that really kind of started, in my opinion, a snowball effect that really never could catch up.
Got it. So did you have a target company in mind that you wanted to acquire, or how did the opportunity come your way?
Yeah, I think this is another problem, right? Is that I don't have access to really knowing, who's who in my particular industry. I suppose I do have access. Like, I'm the president of the American Advertising Federation in my area, so I'm connected to people. People know me, but that's a very different thing from understanding that you know their business, right? And you understand how well they're doing. That's a very different kind of a knowledge, to have of people. And so, no, this person came to me, and it did not seem weird to me in the fact that the person who I bought the leaseholds from improvements from when I first started was a person who came to me and said, you know what, I think you'd be really good at this. I'm either going to sell this to you or I'm leaving and I'm closing. And I was like, it was such a great experience for me that it didn't really faze me that someone else would approach me and ask me. And to be perfectly honest, the way I work and the way I've been building this business, I don't have time to go out and look for something or vet anybody or, ask the right questions or, it's just not possible for me. So this person approached me, and maybe that was another problem. However, I don't think if I had slowed the process down, it would have been as big of a problem.
Got it. Interesting. So one of the things that we talk to people about when they're contemplating an acquisition is surround yourself with a team. Get an M&A advisor, get an M&A accountant, get an M&A attorney, put the team together so that you can, truly vet opportunities as they come your way. Did you have any sort of a team behind you that had some experience with mergers and acquisitions?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I have a great lawyer. I have an advisor, a CPA. People are going to look at those things for me. But this is my point, is that those people are only licensed to do what you as the owner dictate to them to do. And again, I mean, is this show just going to be like, let me tell you all my failures, which is fine, because I think this is so much more important. And I do love listening to your show, because I think when you really get down to the real, every owner, if they would be honest, there's a million things that they wish they would have done differently. But I had people that I could really have leaned on a lot harder. Yeah. And I think that's where, I was not as awake and alive to the fact that I'm just pretty bound and determined to do what I'm going to do. Now, we're going to find out in this, some things did not work out and some things did. Yeah. And I think at the foundation of that is that I always bet on me.
Yeah.
And that has gotten me out of so many messes, so many difficulties. And as you pointed out, a very difficult challenge. I mean, nobody listening to this would want to have gone through what I did with, really having to completely redo your business literally from the ground up. Yeah. However, sometimes that can give you a little bit of hubris.
Yeah. Well, I could just tell by your personality that you're gonna make things work out no matter what. But your point, I appreciate you being so honest with the audience, because that's what this show is all about, is helping people avoid the mistakes and the pitfalls. And I try to share it from, my perspective, having done so many transactions, but it's completely different hearing it from somebody who's lived it, and you've lived it. And look, let's face it, you and I are both business owners. We're entrepreneurs. Most business owners and entrepreneurs are A-type personalities. We believe we can do anything. It's one of the reasons we're business owners. But at the same time, having the will to say, okay, I'm going to step back and I need to rely on experts as I go forward. It's hard, but you'll learn the longer you're in business. It's really the smart thing to do, right?
Right. But I'm going to interject there one thing.
Yeah.
I'm actually not an A-type personality. And I will tell you something really interesting is that I'm not this detail person. I'm not this person who's like, I'll just do it. I am constantly the delegator. I'm like, I think you could do this better. I think you could do this better. And that is what is so crazy and interesting to me about this experience, is that beautiful part of my personality did not bear out in this experience. But I do think it's kind of like that determined. I am that, really solid, like, work ethic, believe in myself, I can do this, I'll figure it out some way, or I'm very positive, and that sometimes is a downside to it. But that's what's kind of interesting to me. I'm not an A-type, and I kind of wish maybe if I had been, I would have been like, now where's this? Now where's this? Now where's this? And I just was far too believing, far too trusting in the relationship that I had, because I didn't know this person. And so again, I know that you're probably already thinking, yep, I know the layers of problems that are already going to occur here.
Well, let's dive in. So you get contacted, you start to go down the path. What happens? Tell us the story. What happens from there?
Well, I was contacted, and I do keep a very busy schedule, as you can imagine, and I speak a lot. I happen to be at a very intense executive retreat when I was called. And so it was pulling me away from what I was supposed to be, really doing and focusing on. Now, at this retreat, interestingly enough, was one of my advisors. But she was very busy doing the retreat, right? And so the interesting thing is I kind of took this, I'll just do this myself, kind of thing. And that was obviously the wrong take. But by being contacted, someone else laid down a timeline for me. And I was not strong enough to stand up against that and say, no, that timeline does not work for me. I need more time to look at this, more time to do this. But it was very enticing, and there are a lot of fits. And if I had to do it all again, I would buy it again. I would do it differently.
Okay.
But there are so many things that were absolutely a perfect fit. It was almost like, this is what you've been hoping for. This could really do this for you.
So how did it fit for you? What made the sense? And by the way, were you contacted by the owner or somebody that was representing the owner?
No, the owner directly.
Okay. So directly. And so why was this a fit? Was it a technology that would make sense for you? Were there people that you were going to get in the acquisition? Where was the strategic fit for you?
Yeah, a couple of things. I think 3 things. Number one, it was location. It was a natural expansion, just in a radius to me. Number 2, it was a diversification of my portfolio. So as you mentioned, I'm very heavily B2B lead gen, digital business. This one happened to be travel and tourism. Okay, now let me just tell you that in 2019, that sounded wonderful. Okay. Please don't put your COVID hat on and think, Priscilla, what were you thinking?
Okay. It looked great in 2019. Nobody can fault you for that.
It really, really did. And then the third thing, yes, I was when you kind of started talking at the beginning about how painful it is to hire and to find the right people, and to do that at scale, literally, I mean, tears, right? Okay. And so there were 3 particular positions I was looking for. One was a web designer, in-house web designer, and developer, a photographer, and a videographer. I was looking for those things to expand my team. Everybody else would just be extra icing on the cake, but I needed those 3 positions, and I got 2 out of the 3 from that acquisition. So it was really became more of an acqui-hire kind of situation, and buying a portfolio out.
Okay, that's great. I mean, those are awesome reasons to be doing an acquisition. So what transpires from there? So it sounds like you and the other owner start having conversations, and talk to us about the process. What happens from there?
Yeah, so I thought I was doing a pretty good job on the process. First of all, of course, he wanted more money. Then I was like, I'm just not that crazy. Like, no, that's not what it's worth.
So he had a price for the business that he wanted.
Absolutely. And
Okay.
my first indication of why I really, went very, very forcefully with him was that his price was based on what he needed for his family and to start another business. I'm like, that's just not my problem.
Right.
That's not my issue. Like, this is, are you selling a business or are you not? And the business has to be worth this. And so right away, I'm like, no, I'm not even having that conversation. But by me, putting my foot down and saying that, the whole conversation changed. I thought, okay, well, I don't have to do what this guy says. I'm not that dumb. However, you'll see in some of these, maybe we might beg to differ in a few minutes, but I did my best. Let me just say I did my best. But, that was also kind of a red flag of going, I don't know that this guy really understands what this business is worth. And this is one of the underlying things that it took me a long time to realize, even maybe 8-10 months after I had acquired it. There's no way that guy was running this company. He lost key people along the last year that made it where he knew it was absolutely dragging down, and he was barely keeping it afloat because he did not have the information, the knowledge, the personality, the work ethic, the employee relationship. He didn't have any of those things that he could have kept it going.
So this was a sinking ship, and you didn't quite know that at the time.
Right. Now, the business itself wasn't. The accounts and the people like in it, those were amazing accounts. Amazing.
Okay.
But he was a sinking ship. There's no way. I could have just let it play out for 6 months. I could have gone picked them all up.
Oh, interesting.
Right. Because
how did you know that it was overvalued? Did you have somebody on your team that was helping you understand how to value a business, and they were guiding you through that, or you intuitively knew it?
I would say, first of all, I intuitively knew it, and then I got, someone to actually look at it. And I talked my CPA through it, and I talked a business, valuation person through it. And we, kept chatting about it, because the interesting thing was it was identical to my size. I would have been doubling my growth. And so the amount of contracts and the amount of profit was something I'm living in. That's the soup I'm swimming in. I know those numbers just in the core of my being. So when I saw a P&L with exactly my same numbers, but with fewer clients, but with the same number, right? So I in my portfolio, I have more clients, but that same number, I knew exactly what that would be worth. I knew how much it would take to service those same types of, contracts.
Got it. Interesting. So you start to gather information, you push back on value. Did you make an offer? Did you formalize an offer for the owner?
Yeah, absolutely. And I didn't budge on what I offered.
Okay.
I'm like, look, it
a formal offer? Did you draft a letter of intent? And
had my lawyer do that.
Okay.
Yeah, had my lawyer do that. And it was an SBA loan. So we had to jump through a lot of SBA hoops, right? So it's not like I could just go out there and do whatever I wanted, to do.
Got it.
So there were a lot of things, there were a lot of checks and balances that I thought would check and balance. And yet, there were a lot of things that got left out.
Well, that's a good point, because, the SBA, when you go through the SBA, that is a natural checkpoint governor, maybe on value, right? Because when you apply for an SBA loan, what people maybe don't understand is that even after the bank underwrites the loan, it has to go outside of the bank to an independent third-party appraisal firm to get valued. And so if you have missed value, it's going to get checked by a third party, and they'll come back and tell you if they think you're overpaying. Absolutely. Now, the thing they're not doing is they're not doing diligence, as you probably very well know. They're just looking at the numbers that are presented to them in the tax returns and the P&Ls. But it sounds like the offer that you put in front of him, you got approved by the bank. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. And, the SBA evaluator really was trying to make it larger. And I'm like, I can tell you right now, there's no way. I just had to fight for it. I'm like, that I know this business, and there's no way that I'm paying that for it. So it's not about what he thinks it's worth, or what SBA, evaluator thinks. It's what it's worth to me. Otherwise, I don't need to be the person buying it.
Right. So you made the offer, it got accepted. How did you approach due diligence? What did you do there? What did you learn about due diligence?
Well, this is where it gets a little bit of crazy because, I asked for contracts. There was always this, there was a lot of interesting things that were just disorganized in this business. This business had been around longer than I had been. I'm sorry, no, it had been around shorter than I had been, but
Yeah.
had reached my gross receipts in shorter time. And they had
Yeah.
bigger, very significant, I mean, brands, I could tell you that these brands, right?
Okay.
And so it was very attractive in that way. But those contracts, it's like he didn't know where paperwork was. There wasn't a server. Okay, I don't even know what to say to that. The people in a design house in it are working all on Wi-Fi. Like, wait, some of the structure doesn't make sense. And sometimes I just kind of chalk it up to, I'm sorry, I didn't even know to ask, are you all working in plugged in? Seriously, I didn't have a box to check for that. To me, it's just like such a dumb no-brainer. Of course, you have people who are working on massive graphic files, wired into the these are the things. What you don't know, right? To
So
ask.
you were asking for information, and it sounds like it really wasn't coming your way. It either didn't exist or there were roadblocks. At some point in time, did you put up a red flag and go, wait a minute, something doesn't make sense here?
Yeah, I did. But then what happened was then I got a bunch of documentation. Well,
Mhm.
what I didn't, the due diligence I think that I really fell down on the most, if I could just really fault myself for the biggest thing, was not combing through those contracts
Mm.
to a T. Now, on the other hand, he set up a lot of meetings, which I find very interesting, with existing clients who were
Huh.
aware that, I mean, this is weird, right? Who were aware that I was going to be possibly purchasing it and he was going to go on and do something else. So I really,
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
having meetings with people who are looking at me going, oh, Priscilla, we're really excited because you're, been in business longer, you have more organizational. And he would even say to people, you know how I'm not organized about blah, blah, blah. She's very organized and this is a better fit, blah, blah, blah. So I had a lot of meetings face to face with existing clients who told me,
That's,
yeah,
and I have to tell you, almost 20 years of doing that's not
that
typical.
is so weird,
Usually an
right?
acquirer never meets the clients until after the closing.
Right,
So I could understand why that was disarming for you, right? I mean, it's like,
right.
okay, he's willing to let me meet clients.
Right. And so
Uh,
because of that, I didn't, and I really should have, but I was in the process of just starting to go through those contracts. But I'm like, well, I won't look through their contract because they're right here telling me they're staying, that they can't wait for me to come solve X,
so
Y,
there's an
Z and be
underlying
there.
problem here that I'm dying, the question that begs to be asked is, okay, so you should have looked at the contracts, you met with the clients, what happened? Were those
Yeah.
contracts not enforceable? Did people, what happened?
They were enforceable. There were a couple of them that were, basically if they gave 30 days notice, they could get out. There were some
Uh,
clauses like that. On the other hand, nobody really took me up on that because they had been a little bit in a state. They really needed a lot of things going. They needed me to take over the helm right then. But
uh-huh.
when it came to resign, I can't tell you how many times I had this had this conversation. Oh my gosh, Priscilla, it has been so wonderful with you. I cannot believe that this has solved this and this and this. It's been too much drama. We need to just move on.
Wow.
And I'm like, and I know you could look at that and think, why is this person coming on the show and being willing to, say that? Because you think if you did a great job, of course they'd keep you on.
Sure.
But unfortunately, what I didn't know was that things had been going south for so long that people had already really started making some plans
Uh,
of, moving. And really, I'm not joking when I say some people said to me, oh my gosh, I really love you so much. I'm not saying no forever, but my boss, this person, they just, I mean, this guy just screwed so many things up and so many empty promises at this point that we have to just kind of go a different way and just try and
wow.
get a breath of fresh air and start over.
And
So I
nobody
had it
and
for
none of these clients hinted that to you when you met with them.
in person, and some of
Yeah.
them who I knew through other people,
Wow.
right?
Hmm.
So
Interesting.
very, very interesting. And I don't live I don't live in Chicago, right? I live in
Yeah.
a much smaller,
Sure.
town and a
Right.
community. And so, while I'm, I don't sit here and give myself a hard, I don't lay down and cry about it. I mean, it is what it is. And I certainly am not someone who is going to beat myself up on it. You know what you know, and you do the best that you can.
Yeah.
But I do think talking about these errors is so helpful to other owners. And
what
it's
would you
so
have done
helpful to me.
differently? So you met with these clients. What do you think you could have done differently to avoid the mass exodus? And was it 50% of the clients that left? Was it 20? What was the order of magnitude here?
Well, by the end of the year, I mean, you're getting pretty close to 100%.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
You lost
Mm-hmm.
almost 100% of the clients.
Mm-hmm. On the other hand, so
Yeah.
let me kind of tell you why it worked out for me.
Okay.
So part of the gravitas of getting those accounts and having those people and having that momentum did secure us a lot of big new other clients,
Oh,
right?
okay.
And also those acqui-hires were so key for me that I had basically what you could call, without it being really official, a waiting list for Little Bird marketing. We just did not have the capacity. We had such a good reputation, still do, but I'm not, I'm not trying. Obviously, I'm someone who just told you everything I did wrong. Let me tell you all the things I did right. Was that Little Bird marketing was growing at such a crazy pace, and it still is. We just had a record Q4 at the end of 2020, for crying out loud.
Good.
And so really what happened was I grabbed those people and brought them into our system.
Yeah.
And I didn't keep all of the people either, because there was a massive difference of work ethic going on that I never really could match up. And so, for example, when I said they were doing the same number, volume, the same gross receipts, but they had like 10 or 12 accounts, whereas over for the same volume over at my other business, we probably had 70 accounts doing that. And so what's interesting to me, I'm like, we had the exact same number of people doing one and the other. And it really was an eye opener to me. Not that I didn't know it in some way, but my team is, they're just animals. They are amazing at production. They are so organized. We have so many great online systems. We just project manage the hell out of stuff. And you cannot get a team to move into that very easily. Not in mass, in mass.
Right. Wow. Almost 100% attrition from the client base, but there's a silver lining there. Have you been able to bring any of those clients back?
Oh yeah. And I do think several of them are coming back. You have to remember that some of them left temporarily, and we had 2020, right? And they were travel tourism. So I'm not, to me, I feel like I have very good, I just had someone call me a week ago and need something, and everything's going to be shifting and changing. And the thing is that I did right by every single one of them, had the most amazing exit interviews with them as they left. And what could we have done differently? Priscilla, you couldn't have done anything. It was just, we were so burned, and we, great conversations. Every single one of them, I have their cell phone numbers, they would call me about something. It's not, it was not this horrendous, nasty leaving, but it was heartbreaking in the sense that it did not pan out the way that I wanted it to pan out. But I do believe it's going to be a much bigger turnaround in 2021 as we, bring a lot of better, possibility for travel and tourism in this particular area.
For sure. So that you had an SBA loan. I want to talk a little bit about that. Did the owner get 100% of the purchase price at the closing table, or did you have some separate payments due to the previous owner?
No, I didn't have to pay it. I rolled everything into that. And so, yeah, I didn't have, I did pay a lot of money down, but, I paid my fair share and then got the rest of it alone, but no other agreement. He's like, okay, so I'll come in. And I'm like, no, you don't need to be here. I did give him a 30-day earn out just in case I needed questions. And I'm like, but he's like, okay, I'll be there on Monday. I'm like, no, you're never come. I need the key. You're never coming in here again. And he was just shocked as all get out that he wasn't going to just come co-lead with me. I'm like, are you kidding me? You got to get out of here. These are my people. And he was shocked as all get out that he was not going to be like co-running the place with me.
Got it. So you still have to perform on that loan, obviously, but it sounds like you've been able to grow the business in other ways. So you're able to do that. Kudos to you.
It's not been an issue there, but can you imagine? I mean, it could be a real disaster,
Yeah. I mean, if you hadn't picked up other accounts and these great people, you could be sitting there with a loan. Interesting.
Yeah. Are you going to cry your eyes out for me right now, Domenic? Do you
so look, I love to hear that there's a silver lining here. And I know you didn't want to brag on yourself, but I've done a little bit of research here. You truly are a name, a known name, an entity and quantity in the B2B digital marketing space. And so I'm not surprised that you've been able to overcome this. I want to go back to one of the questions I asked you earlier for the audience here. Do you think there's anything you could have done differently when interviewing with those clients? And keep in mind, most buyers are really never going to have that opportunity to interview clients, right? So, but is there anything you think you could have done differently there with the clients and questioning, or your diligence, that would have thrown up a red flag and you might have taken a step back from doing this deal?
Two things. I mean, yes and no. I could have called those people independently because he met with me with them. And it did not occur to me to reach out to them independently. He had also let his executive director know what was happening. So I was meeting with her and him and the client. And so certainly I would think she would tell me.
Yeah.
You know, and so could I have done something differently? Yes, I could have called them independently and said, look, I haven't made this decision. Could you just tell me? Now, if they would have or not, I don't know, because they.
But it also might have been a breach of confidentiality as well. So you that's a slippery slope there.
Yeah,
but,
yeah,
okay.
That's really interesting. But the other piece of it was, you know, I think him doing that made me take my eyeballs away from the contracts.
Yeah.
And by not really going through and really reading through the contracts, and I'm not saying I didn't read them, but I mean, obviously some of it's a blur, you know, obviously I read them, but not really considered what's the worst case scenario here, because he had far too many outs, right? And my contracts over on Little Bird Marketing, now I have non-performance clauses. If we don't perform, of course you should be let out. I mean, you cannot be paying a marketing company a retainer when they're not showing every day what they're doing. But he had no transparent system to report to the clients. There was no system. And I guess the one other thing I think you haven't asked that I think is actually really interesting, that someone might find interesting, is that I brought all of the organization over there, which is my IP. It's a system that I created called SOAR. And one of the regrets I have there is that what it has done is pushed me back a bit. The next possible thing I was going to be doing at Little Bird Marketing is, you know, getting a patent and really protecting my IP. And so that's been delayed. And that is only the bigger cost of business that I regret, right? Because I took my eyes off of Little Bird Marketing and how successful it had been. And yes, it saved us from this kind of thing. But, you know, I feel like this year I'm playing catch up with some of those types of things that are really the next things we need to do in order to scale bigger.
Got it. That's great. That's great. So let me ask you this. Would you ever consider doing another acquisition in the future?
Absolutely. I still think I still think that if you want to grow at scale, I'm not saying it's the only way, but good Lord, I've done it organically. You are right. It is so hard. It is powerfully hard. And, you know, there's almost no margin for error for small business.
Yeah.
You know, and it's one thing when you're one person and it's a lifestyle, but, you know, right today, and I'm sure we'll have more in about a week, you know, but right today, you know, I've got 12 families depending on me for their kids, for their bills, you know, for their livelihoods. And you don't have a margin for error that I think larger companies have. Now, larger companies fail all the time. So, you know, who's to say that I'm right with that? But, you know, when you are holding that as a person and that responsibility as a person, that is tough.
So let me ask this last question. We'll wrap up, and I'm going to give you an opportunity to add anything else you want to. If you do an acquisition again in the future, what are the one or two things you're certain to do different?
I would not be the person vetting this business. I would absolutely, I wouldn't even really probably vet someone who comes to me. I would want someone who knows that, you know, that area. knows, business valuation and, has those kinds of connections. It's kind of like I say, people ask me all the time, I do marketing. Hey, can you do PR? No, they are different things, And so this kind of idea, like, yeah, of course I'm a business person. I could evaluate that, but those are different things.
Yes.
I'm evaluating it from me as an owner, me as an operator,
Yes.
but I need someone to evaluate it from a scalable perspective, from a business valuation perspective, from a contract, just so many other places. And I would rather someone say, hey, I've spotted something else out here that we could, I would rather, it's kind of like the person that you don't want to hire the person who's been out of a job. You want to hire the person who's been working and goes, oh yeah, I never thought about going somewhere else.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Is that a good metaphor for
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Along with, you want something done, bring it to the busiest person in the office,
Absolutely.
right?
This is why I get shit done all the time, Dom.
Well, and just as a shameless plug here, that's exactly what our firm specializes in, is helping people do exactly what you just described. I want to give you a minute to talk about Little Bird and Soar, because my perspective on business and growth today is your world is sort of dominating almost every industry. If you don't have a digital footprint, you are a dinosaur. And I have to say, as a business owner that doesn't come from your world, it's very hard to navigate your world. I mean, new platforms are popping up all the time. The platforms are out there, change their algorithms all the time. Like, keeping up with a digital and social footprint is so hard. So take a minute to talk about SOAR and your company, and if there's any advice you have for business owners that are listening or want to be business owners as it relates to B2B digital marketing.
Yeah, for sure. I'm going to answer that, but I'm going to come back to your shameless plug to say why I would totally agree with you about that. But sometimes I think you realize this, there are business owners who don't realize they're out of business yet.
Yeah.
Right. But they are. But they just, it takes you, there's a lag time to when you realize you're out of business. Right.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I think there are a lot of people there right now. Right.
Yeah.
And so I say that why that's a good plug for you, but that kind of plugs into, where Little Bird comes in, is that, it is hard. It is, it is a mystery to a lot of people, and it is just a noisy market. Everybody has an opinion. Everybody and their nephew has an opinion about what you should do with your website, with SEO, with, your content, with a message, with how you tell your story, with, I don't even care what it is. It's just everything, right? It's so overwhelming. Yeah. And our ideal client is someone who is not the owner, because they're too close to it, right? Yeah. We want that, not necessarily marketing manager, but any role. I don't care what the role is, but if it's someone who acts like an owner, they act like it's their money, they are inextricably passionate about the revenue generation of their company, that's my ideal client, right? I want to talk with them because they are very busy and they need the confidence in the short-term and the long-term growth of the company while they still can get their actual job done, right? Mm-hmm. And so we joke around all the time about how Little Bird Marketing is really just a sleep improvement agency. Mm. Finally, these people can get some sleep and not wake up in the middle of the night on Saturday night or Sunday night and be like, oh my gosh, who's going to post this to, LinkedIn on Monday? This chaos that reigns in digital, the unknown, and they don't know how to measure. So even if they figure out what to do, they don't know how to measure. Okay. So that's kind of the backdrop to it. But our IP SOAR is SOAR. Strategy first. It's strategic, it's organized, it's accountable, it's repeatable. You can crib that for me. You don't have to work with Little Bird Marketing. That's my gift. But if you're going to create a marketing plan, it better be in that order, not just those things, but in that order, right? And so then coming alongside and saying, okay, well, that's all great, but now how do I do the unsexy work, which, a lot of agencies don't want to do, which is how do I get all of that in order? And how do I report this transparently, item by item, back to the client? And how do I hold my feet to the fire for deliverables? How many blogs, how many social posts, how many lead magnets, how many emails, how many, whatever it is that you need, right? And then the other piece to it, which is kind of, I'll end on this, but on February 28th, we're almost to the date where you and I are recording right now. February 28th, last year, I was standing on a stage in Amsterdam. And I mean, I could just see like the bubble still over my head of what I just finished saying, that if your team, if you have not pulled digital transformation, digital content, and digital prowess and digital dominance across your company or your agency, it's not the future of work, it's the past of work. You're already behind and you just haven't realized it yet.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I get off the stage. First time I hear the word COVID, I got to get on a plane. I got to go home. Right. So, come a year later, and of course we're in huge demand right now because people realize, oh my gosh, we should have started 2 years ago. We should have started et cetera, et cetera. And we do things for the corporate, but then I teach people how to be influencers. So we have a digital transformation course where people learn how to be B2B influencers on LinkedIn, Clubhouse, Twitter, whatever it is, because that is not the future of work. It is the now of work. And so I guess I would say, that has been the silver lining, is that we had all the momentum of Little Bird going into that. And then while we got very unlucky with travel and tourism completely falling apart, we got very lucky that, the digital transformation piece of what we do in Little Bird is the absolute number one. So we've got the number one and the first and last, right, of demand. So I think in that way, sometimes you can't pat yourself on the back too hard. There's decisions you make that are great, decisions that I make that, are not so great. My husband does like to really, encourage me to say, yes, I get it. People think you're lucky, but also, Priscilla, luck favors the organized.
Yeah.
So,
Yes, absolutely.
So that's a little bit of my story and why I think that we're in demand, and why I think I'm still excited and I'm not completely discouraged by just that one acquisition going wrong. I still think it's a very viable way to grow.
Well, listen, I have to thank you so much for coming on and really sharing, obviously there's a silver lining, but, you really shared some unbelievable nuggets for our community, and they should be very grateful for you being willing to share your story. So thank you so much. And if anybody in the audience wanted to get in contact with you, Priscilla, how could they do that?
Well, we're at littlebirdmarketing.com. We have tons of resources that are absolutely free, and we're not slimy salesy people. So take what you want. I won't give you a hard time. And then also, of course, I'm on LinkedIn all the time. I'm an influencer there, and I will answer your message, your question myself. So find me, Priscilla McKinney, on LinkedIn.
All right, Priscilla, thank you so much.
Thanks, Dom. I've really had a great time.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode. All of today's information will be available in the show notes. If you enjoy our content, please subscribe and review our podcast. I look forward to seeing you again on the next episode of the M&A Unplugged podcast. And until then, please remember that scaling, acquiring, or selling a business takes time, preparation, and the proper knowledge.